Chanukah. Hope you're all well.
Yes.
It's the next edition of Meaning in Mitzvot, but we do a special Chanukah edition of that this week. And obviously, Chanukah isn't mentioned in the Torah, but there's still some fascinating things we can try and understand about the festival of Chanukah and the particular mitzvahs related to it. So we know, obviously, that Chanukah is all about lighting the Chanukah candles. And after having lit them, we say, Haneros halalu, and Shanachnu madlikim, these candles that we light, Kodeshem, we say they are holy. Vein lanu, reshus lehishtamesh behem elo lirosam bivad. And we're not allowed to make ordinary use of them. We're only allowed to look at them. This is a very interesting statement to make. For two things we're saying, that these lights are holy, and we're not allowed to make use of them. We're only meant to look at them. No other mitzvah really, and any mitzvah in the Torah, none of that. We don't say about Shabbos candles. We don't say that they're holy. We don't say we can't make use of them. We never make that declaration. So what is it about Ner Chanukah that we make this particular declaration? What does it mean that they are holy and we're not allowed to make any ordinary use of them, but only meant to look at them? So, which implies that there's actually a mitzvah, part of the mitzvah of lighting Ner Chanukah is to actually look at them. So I want to share an answer, an explanation given by what's known as the Nesiva Shalom, who's the Slonim Rebbe. Slonim Rebbe says the following: Yesh levaya inyan haneros halalu kodeshem. He says we have to understand what is this idea that these lights are holy. Ma mashmaus hakadusha shechala aleihem ad she'in lanu rishus leishtamesh behem. What is the essence of this holiness which is attached, associated to these candles, which means we cannot make ordinary use of them? And we ought to understand what does it mean that we're only allowed to look at them. Which implies that looking at them, seeing them, is actually a chelik, is actually a portion in the mitzvah. It's actually part of the mitzvah, is to see them, to look at them. And as is proven by the Gemara in Shabbos, it says, the Gemara says that when a person sees somebody else's Ner Chanukah, you're walking out in the street and you see in the window somebody else's Ner Chanukah, you're meant to make a bracha over them. Again, very unusual. You don't normally take other mitzvahs. Say you're having a walk on Seder night and you peer through someone else's window and you see them eating matzah. You don't make a bracha over the matzah that you see, or you see someone else with the lulav and esrog on sukkahs. You don't make a bracha over seeing what they've got. So why do we, if we see Ner Chanukah, do we make a bracha over it? We don't find in any other mitzvah this idea, this requirement of seeing. And if the case is that part of the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is to see them, to look at them, and in fact, there are those who say that there is a very important aspect is looking at them. They're a segula. They are a good sign for many things. By looking at Ner Chanukah, that's a segula. It's a good sign for a number of different things. So let's try and understand what this is all about. So he answers. Those explain. There's a beautiful pasuk in Mishlei that says, Hiner mitzvah, because a mitzvah is a candle, the Torah or, and the Torah is light. And Chazal explain, our sages explain this verse can be understood by way of an analogy, a moshel, to a person who's walking around in the dark. If he lights a candle, he'll be able to see enough that he saves himself from falling into a hole or catching himself on thorns. However, the light isn't sufficient to protect him, to save him from bandits. So you can see a little bit in front of you. It's enough light to be able to see that you're not going to fall down a ditch or get scratched by thorns. But it's not enough light to see that there may be bandits may be dangerous people around. However, once day breaks, he's saved from everything. So he can only save at night. All he can do is light a candle. He can only save himself from small danger, but he can't see the big danger. Once day breaks, he's safe from everything. The Zehu Torah or, and that's the meaning of the second part of the verse. And the Torah is light. The Torah saves us from everything. So Kineh mitzvah, a mitzvah will save us from the small dangers, but the big dangers still lurk out there, the existential dangers. But the Torah, which is synonymous with light, in fact, in Aramaic, the Torah is referred to as the word oraita, which means light, and that saves us from everything. So it goes on, who perish Torah or who are or haganus. Now, this not talking about any general type of light here. We're talking about specific light. We're talking about an or haganus, which means a hidden light. Or ha'elokos shenivra b'yom rishon. Now, this refers to the light that God created on the first day of the creation. As again, it's brought down by our sages. That God saw that the world wasn't ready for this divine light. And therefore he hid that light in the Torah and for those who toil in Torah. In another place it says that God hid this light, he stored it away for the righteous. This light, this divine light that was created on the first day of creation, then hidden, this is a holy light which cannot be used. It's forbidden to be used for mundane purposes. And that is why the Torah, which has this divine light hidden in it, we're forbidden to make mundane use of it. As it says, Al Taseh Kardum Lachbobo, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos in Ethics of the Father says, you can't use the Torah as like a shovel to dig with. Meaning you can't, if a person's acquired Torah knowledge, they can't use it as a means of benefiting materially. It's not there to be used in a mundane way. The Torah is to be learnt for its own sake and not for a person's benefit. A person shouldn't think, I'm going to learn Torah in order that I gain fame and fortune. No, you learn it for the sake of learning Torah. In the similar way, the lights of Chanukah, which again we see in certain works where it's compared, this light of the Chanukah is this hidden light. And that is why we say that the Ner Chanukah, the lights of Chanukah, are holy. Because the lights of Chanukah reveal to us, enlighten us to this divine light which is hidden, which is the Holy of Holies. And that is why we're not allowed to make use of it, any mundane use of it. We're only allowed to look at it. So the only benefit we're allowed to have from the Ner Chanukah is to look at them. And the whole idea of looking at them is in order that through this light we enlighten our neshama, our soul. That the soul of a Jew should be enlightened, illuminated by this divine light. And the type of sight we're talking about here, sight is one of the senses which is closely associated with the brain. As we know, I mean, my very limited medical knowledge, we know that the only reason we see is because, thank God, there is the optic nerve, which goes straight from the eye all the way to the brain. So the eye is like the lens of a camera. It allows light and images to enter into the head, but the eye doesn't see itself. only on the fact that the images and the light, shapes, etc., then travel down the optic nerve and are formed within the brain into some intelligible shape. That's how we see. So that's what it's saying here. When we're looking at the light, actually what we're doing is this light it generates a koach panimi, an inner force, which is associated with the neshama. It's deep within us. And this, in fact, was the battle, the fight between the Chashmonaim and the Yavanim, between the Greeks and the Hasmoneans, the Jews at the time of the Chanukah story. This was the essence of their battle. Because the Greeks sought to darken the eyes of the Jewish people. What was the battle that the Greeks waged against the Jews? It wasn't a physical battle. They weren't trying to kill us. I mean, although they would have been quite happy to do so. They weren't trying to physically annihilate us. They were trying to spiritually annihilate us. And that's the major difference between the Chanukah story and the Purim story. Purim, Haman's decree was to kill the Jews. He couldn't care less whether if we converted out of Judaism. He just wanted to exterminate us. Yeah, and that's why, as we know, Haman's descendant was Hitler Yomach Shemoy. Just purely, the intention is to rid the world of Jews physically. The Greeks had a different idea. It was a clash of philosophies and civilizations. The Greeks wanted us to abandon our religion. They wanted us to hashkicham Torah secha, that we say in Al Nisim. They wanted us to forget our Torah and no longer observe its laws. So they would try to darken our eyes in a non-physical way. They wanted to darken the eyes of Jewish people. They wanted to darken the light of the soul. They wanted it that the Jews' soul should no longer feel the light, this divine light. They wanted us to be physical beings. As we know, Greek society, Greek culture celebrated the physical aspects of existence, only the physical aspects of existence. Yeah, and that's why they invented the Olympics. You know, it was a celebration of the human form. And in fact, they used to compete with no clothes on because it was about looking at and admiring and giving precedence to the human physical form. Certainly doing away with the other aspects of human life, which we recognize as the neshama, as the soul. And that is why one of the decrees that the Greeks made against the Jews is that we should write on the horn of an ox that we have no portion with the God of Israel. They wanted us to totally renounce our connection to spirituality, to God. And through that, they were hoping to cause the darkening of the souls of the Jewish people. And therefore, against this, and therefore, what comes against this is the revelation of the lights of the Chanukah, the light of the soul. And that is why the essence of Ner Chanukah is to see them, is to look at them. That by looking at the light, it allows the light to enlighten our neshama. And that is why the Gemara says, if a person sees someone else's Ner Chanukah, they should make a bracha, because that is the essence of the mitzvah. It's the seeing of them, not necessarily the lighting of them. Although we make a bracha, lahadlik ner shel Chanukah, the lighting is the oseh mitzvah, is the making of the mitzvah, but actually seeing it is an essential element to it. So that's the first thing to understand. And this idea that light is obviously the opposite of darkness, light being associated with the neshama, with the soul, being associated with Torah, the complete opposite of what the Greeks were trying to do. Okay, now this is what type of light are we talking about here? So it goes on and says, now this light is in fact an eternal light. Because it is a Chazal, again as a Chazal say, Aaron The Chazal tell us that when the Torah lists all the offerings that the princes brought to the temple or the Beis Hamikdash or the Mishkan at its inauguration, Aaron was upset because didn't have a special offering to bring. Amalo Kodesh Baruch Hu to Moshe. So Hashem says to Moshe, Amalo, say to him, Shalach Gadol Mishalehem, that your offering, Aaron, will be greater than theirs. Sh'ata madlik u'meitiv es haneiros u'shalach hayam la'ad. Because Aaron, your job and your descendants' job will be to light the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, and this will always be your role. The Aaron, whose sons are the Kohanim, your role in the Beis Hamikdash will be to light and to tend to the menorah, and that is an everlasting job. It's greater than this. So the princes, although they brought offerings at the inauguration of the Mishkan, that was only a one-time thing. Whereas Aaron's descendants would constantly be involved in the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. The Ramban explains, and this actually applies to the lights of Chanukah. So even once, unfortunately, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and we no longer can light the golden menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, that light remains in the Ner Chanukah. And of everything that was associated with the Beis Hamikdash, the only thing that remains is the Ner Chanukah. What Chanukah is the festival. We remember the lighting of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. The one thing that remains from all the things that used to take place there. Why? Because this light of the menorah that continues to illuminate us with the light of Ner Chanukah is the only force through which we are able not to allow the darkness of exile to overcome us. It sustains us. The ability to continue to light Ner Chanukah throughout all the generations of our exile is the one thing that has kept us going as Jews throughout this exile. So even though, and that is why the mitzvah of Chanukah, which is the last of the mitzvahs that was instituted by the Chachamim, they did it before the Jews started their long exile. In order that this light should enlighten us with the light of the divine light. And through this we will be able to continue throughout the exile. The Jewish people have a high, elevated ability to be able to put up with whatever tests and difficulties we have to face. As long as we feel a closeness to God, because then we're able to deal with anything. The worst thing of all would be that we no longer feel this divine light, and therefore we are unable to sustain. People can go through terrible hardships as long as they feel a certain closeness to either other people or something which gives them the ability to keep going. For us as a collective, as Jewish people, we are able to survive because we still feel a connection to God, to this divine light. And the exile is the concept of exile is the darkness of the soul. As God says, behold, I will surely hide my face from you on that day. So exile is associated with God hiding himself. And we said, we say, because God isn't amongst us, these terrible things have happened to us. This is the whole difficulty of servitude. The darkness of the soul. And the whole pains, the whole birth pangs of redemption, firstly, we have to go through this whole darkness of God being hidden from us. So this implies in general to all of the Jewish people and specifically to each and every Jew. How terrible it is for us on a national level and on a personal level to be in darkness. Because then we are involved in Torah on account in amongst this darkness. And we dub and we pray on account through this darkness. And everything we do is in darkness. And even the source of our faith and belief in God, that we are believers, the children of believers, is darkened and it's very difficult for us. In a fascinating idea, he says here now, that he says you can compare this to somebody who chas v'shalom has to have a limb amputated. Now he said even if the limb is a living limb, and some reason has to be amputated or is amputated, the person themselves, even though they've lost a living part of them, they are not considered to be dead. V'rak, because they're still living. So you could lose, a person could lose any limb and still be considered to be alive. However, v'rak hasuma chashuv kames. However, we are told, we have in our sources, that a person who is blind is considered to be dead. If a person chas v'shalom loses their sight, it's as if they have died. Kach beruchnius. We're talking about not physically, but spiritually. Gam mishel akoi begamim v'sholtzim bo midos haros tochonos ros adayin eino chashuv kames. Similarly, in spiritual aspects, a person who has been afflicted by terrible, terrible things and has done terrible things and given in to all things they shouldn't have done, nevertheless, are still not considered to be dead. However, if this person has become spiritually blinded, meaning they no longer can see the divine light, they no longer can appreciate the connection to God, then it's as if they're dead, spiritually dead, because they've cut off from the source. It's like taking you have an electrical appliance. When it's plugged into the mains, it has a use, even if you're not necessarily using it at that moment, But as soon as you disconnect it from the mains, it's a useless implement. You can't do anything. That's what we're like. That's what we as human beings are like. Yes, we may be distant from. We may not be plugged. We may not be switched on. This is, I think, is quite a good analogy. We might not be switched on spiritually, but we're still connected. But once you pull the plug, once you're blinded, you're no longer able to see the divine light and be connected to it. You are spiritually dead. Chas v'shalom. Umilvad zeh hare b'shah sheyehudi shero b'chashkos azay tashetz cheshech v'yiloda. For example, at that point, it's dark and it was night. But tamush koich yah. She'az miskabrim etzlo kol minei yitzarim afelim she'enu shaychim ela biklal. Once you're disconnected like that spiritually, then you're just at the will of your inclinations. K'zeh korach hachoshech. And this is the force of darkness. Again, we come back. When a person is walking around in the dark, you bang into things, you trip over things. Why? Because that's the force of darkness. You can't see what you're doing. You are susceptible to lots of dangers. Tizrach Hashemesh Yasfun. The only remedy to it is that the light should shine again. As we go back to the very beginning of creation, what does it say? The God created said, let there be light. What was it before that? Choshech. There was darkness. And the specific remedy to that darkness was Vayome Elokim Yehi Or. God said, let there be light. And there was light. Hu Or Halokis Hameya Es Kol HaMeshachim. This is the divine light which illuminates all darkness. V'zos Hishya HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'rov Rachamav V'chasadav L'chal Yisrael. And God, through His great kindness and mercy of the Jewish people, allowed this light to remain. And even though nothing else from the Beis Hamikdash remains, as He promised Aaron, your association, that of the lighting of the menorah, will remain. The light of the Chanukah from year to year will remain, and will enliven the sparks of the neshama of every Jew who may have drowned in the darkness. And that's what we mean when we say these lights are holy, and we're not allowed to make use of them. We're only allowed to look at them. What does it mean to look at them? To look at them, to open up the eyes to the soul, that we should see this divine light, and it should enlighten us through the Ner Chanukah. And it's not that we're permitted to look at them, it's an essential element, an obligation for every Jew to look at the Ner Chanukah. As the Pasuk says, what is it that God asks of us? Only that, ki'im le'yira. Now the yira means to fear, to respect. However, you can read the word as yira, as ra'a, as to see. They're the same letters. What is God saying? What is it God wants from us? All He wants us to do is to see Him. Yeah, it's like a parent says to a child, yeah, all I want you to just call me once in a while. Yeah, God, I want you to see me. All I need you to do is to see me. Son of man, open your eyes, and see the form of your Creator, who stands opposite you in front of you, which is not a physical seeing, but an intellectual understanding. Which for a blind person is already, meaning a physically, spiritually blind person, has already lost that ability. And that's why the Ner Chanukah represent an eternal light, the light which sustains us and lightens us up, until we have an Or Chadash Al Sion Ta'ir, that we our dream is that a new light should come and enlighten Sion, Zion. He says, Ner Chanukah, Nes Chanukah, hu bizman Yisrael, hu b'shafal l'matzev mod. And that is why Ner Chanukah came at a time when the Jewish people were in a very difficult situation. And their victory, their salvation, was something which goes beyond comprehension. At this very lowly position they were in came this great miracle. There's something special about Ner Chanukah which reminds us that even whatever difficult situation we are in, that connection that we have to God is the one thing which will ultimately save us from anything we have. That was the miracle. Yeah. Okay, we celebrate the fact by letting Ner Chanukah, we celebrate the fact, the miracle of the oil lasting for 8 days. But the truth is as much the victory of the Jews at that time over the Greeks, completely miraculous. There's no way the mighty Greek Empire could have been defeated by a small band of Kohanim led by the Hashmonaim. It doesn't make sense. The only answer is that it was a nace, that it was a miracle, because they were fighting with this connection to the Or Elokis, to this divine light, which has ensured, and our connection to it has ensured our survival throughout the generations, both on a national level and on a personal level as well. Okay, well, I hope that gives a new insight into Ner Chanukah and this idea of the candles are holy, they cannot be used for any mundane purpose, and the essential element of it is to look at the Ner Chanukah. Yeah, because we actually at home, when we turn off the lights, the room light, and we sit and we look at the candles, there's something very magical and special about it, and we can see even more than we really possibly understand. Enjoy the rest of Chanukah, everybody. Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining me. Any comments, observations, disagreements?
A simple question, Rabbi. When you consider the spiritual meaning of the lights, why are they so small? They last for what? 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and finished. Why?
So it's a good question. It's a good question. We actually, because another apostle that says, "Ner Hashem nishmas Adam," that the light, that the candle of God is the soul of a human being. That candles represent and actually represent the human being. We're made up of two things. We're made up of physical and spiritual. Yeah. So there's a candle. The candle is made up of the wick and the wax and the flame. Mm. And we only have a limited time here. Like the candle only has a limited time. And we have to shine our light on the world while we have the opportunity.
But the Shabbos candles they last for what, depending on the time of the year, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours.
Yeah, they're different purpose. Shabbos candles are in order to make sure there's shalom bias, that there's light in the home. Those dafka you can use the light. If you have a power cut on Shabbos, you can sit and read by the light of the candles. That's the whole purpose of having them, so that you have light in your home on Shabbos. So that's why they need to last. They should last longer. Now Chanukah is purely to be there as a symbol of this divine light and of the symbolism of the human existence, which is fleeting. It's a good reminder.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Have you got time?
Sure.
Would a person who is blind be obliged to light the candles?
That's a very good question. And there's a wider discussion about, is a blind person obligated in other mitzvahs as well? Yeah. So we would say yes, because there's still a mitzvah to light them. We say it's not a mitzvah to see them. We say an essential element of the mitzvah is to see them. But a blind person can still make the bracha. Why? Because other people could still see them.
Okay.
So their lighting of it allows someone else to see the light, even though they themselves can't see it. It's a good question.
Rabbi, when you said you should make a bracha if you see someone else's Hanukkah candles, say from the street, what bracha do you say?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer off the top of my head what the bracha is. I think I can't. I'll come back to you on that. I can't remember the bracha actually.
Okay. The other thing you said was you turn the lights off in your room where you've lit the Hanukkah candles.
Yeah.
But I thought you leave the lights on so that should you accidentally, I don't know, read something, you can say that you're making use of the light in the room, not the candles.
That's a good point. That's why we have the shamash. The shamash is there so that we're not making use of the Hanukkah candles. We're making use of the shamash, which you're allowed to.